Okay. So this is going to be This is going to be a Stranger Things video essay. I hate what I make. Well, not really. What I hate are all these new essays that came out after the new season. Because these are not essayists. This is tabloid entertainment. These are opinion pieces made by people who are unqualified. I think she was unqualified.
Pretty much, I will let Gemma know that she is a fat cunt. She was unqualified.
There are some that I like. There's this one that came out like 3 years ago, and it talked about how it predicted that season 5 was going to be a flop, and season 5 became a flop, so I find that kind of sickening. I hate opportunists, which I am. I am an opportunist. Do I hate myself? Look at my next bullet point. I don't know, if you clicked on this video, you probably know that like you know what Stranger Things is, okay? But the new season of Stranger Things was not well received at all. It did horribly. There are so many people online talking about how bad it is. The new season's downfall doesn't need so much discourse. So this video is not going to be about season 5, okay? Why is the new season bad? Because the writing is bad. Ta-da, that's it. That's all you need to know. This season wasn't received well because the writing was bad. It had bad writing. Why did it have bad writing? Well, it was written during the writer's strike. The two Duffer brothers, one of the Duffers, his wife, used to be like a writer for the show, but then they divorced, so she didn't actually get on for this new season, even though she like created a lot of the memorable moments of previous. Oh, there's a dead mouse right there. Hold up. It also has been like 10 years since the original season. Like, season 1 came out in what, 2016? I think? It came out years ago, and because of like COVID and the writer's strike, the series got set back. This is a story that should have finished up like 3-4 years ago. So I don't think there's like more to be said about why it flopped. It flopped because the writing is bad. Also, I hate those fucking TikToks. Anyway, I'm not here to rag on the new season. What I do is I use psychoanalysis as a framework to discuss pop culture. I am a Sigmund Freud dick writer. So what I'm gonna do is do what I always do. I'm gonna use a psychoanalytical framework to try and talk about Stranger Things. But specifically, I want to talk about season 1 of Stranger Things because I think it's easier to talk about that one season in a vacuum. It's its own self-contained story. It was supposed to be a one-off. Like, Stranger Things was originally supposed to be kind of like an American Horror Story, like anthology series, where each season was its own story. But the season 1 was so good once it was finished that they're like, oh, we need to follow these children. But this story was written to be self-contained. If you take off the little cliffhanger at the very end where like Will throws up in the thing and then Hopper leaves the thing out in the forest, if you take out that cliffhanger at the very end, season 1 is a self-contained story that doesn't need anything else. So am I capitalizing off of the hate train of season 5? Yes. But am I contributing to the hate? No, I am not. What I'm gonna do, I'm gonna try and talk about season 1 with as little reference to further seasons as possible. And I think going back, season 1 of Stranger Things was such an incredible piece of media. The acting, the score, the iconic props, the story, everything. I really think that season 1 of Stranger Things is one of the best seasons of any show ever. It's not necessarily my favorite season. I love season 3 just because I love the highly saturated and the sound design. I really enjoy season 3, but I can recognize that season 1 is honestly head and shoulders above everything else from the series. But like most of pop culture, there isn't much analysis on Stranger Things. Like, what made the story so good from like a thematic standpoint? Like, what is the show trying to say? What does Joyce Meyer and Billy Bobby Brown mean? Like, if you had to write a book report on Stranger Things, what would you write the book report about? What are the themes? I didn't know. I basically wrote this whole intro and then didn't have anywhere else to go. But I did do a lot of thinking. So let's do a transition. This is part 2. Also, I'm not changing my outfit throughout the video. I did that for my Lady Gaga one and that took too long, so I'm not doing that today. You're getting my dress and my chest. Wait, can I pop my chest? ooh, I'm just so big. Okay, so to start, I don't think that Stranger Things has a deliberate message it's trying to send to the audience. I think it's just a good story. People have this notion that like each piece of a work of art has to have intention and meaning, and all art is trying to tell the audience something or convey certain message. And I don't really think that's the case. The message is just trying to push the story along. The way I view art is like the conscious mind, which is built upon the unconscious mind. It's like the iceberg metaphor that everybody uses. The top of the iceberg is the art that is seen. It's the conscious mind. But the thing is, the art that is built, the conscious mind, is built upon these artistic axioms. The art is built upon these like aesthetic principles that you don't see. It's these aesthetic motivations that really dictate how the art is gonna be. I think of it as like it's a loose connection of psychic soup. It's like an example is like Leonardo da Vinci versus like Salvador Dali. Leonardo da Vinci and Dali are both amazing artists, and you both see the art that they make, but they have different like aesthetic principles that drive them. You can look at a Da Vinci painting and it would be weird if you randomly saw like a dripping clock, because that isn't the rules that Leonardo da Vinci uses. Those are the rules that Salvador Dali uses. It makes sense to see a dripping clock in it because that's the aesthetic rules of the art. And the clock doesn't mean one thing. It's just like it is a conscious representation of these aesthetic motivations that are kind of ineffable. You can't really see. It's not like The Babadook, where like in the movie The Babadook, the titular character, the Babadook, he's a representation of grief. That's what he is. He is a one-for-one stand-in for, it's an allegory. It's like Aesop's fables, or like the stories that Jesus told in the Bible. It's one-for-one things that has one specific meaning you're supposed to get out of it, which a lot of art is allegorical, but I don't think Stranger Things is. It's like how Lady Gaga says in Aura, it's not a statement as much as just a move of passion.
It's not a statement as much as just a move of passion.
Is you're not trying to say something, you're just moving from your artistic impulses. So what I'm gonna do in this video is not necessarily say what Stranger Things is trying to tell you. What I wanna do is unravel the subconscious underpinnings that concoct Stranger Things. Does my hat look better backwards or forwards? I think forwards. I don't know. I think an easy way to start is with the Demogorgon.
The Demogorgon! We're deep shit.
What is the Demogorgon? Well, it's an interdimensional monster. Obviously, the name Demogorgon, it comes from Dungeons and Dragons. And in Dungeons and Dragons, it looks like something different. But Demogorgon comes from the words demon and gorgon. Why is the Demogorgon a demon? Well, because it comes from hell, the upside down, an interdimensional plane. Why is it a gorgon? Well, it's a little bit different. I think gorgon is a stock monster that has to do with sight. And when it comes to the Demogorgon in Stranger Things, it doesn't have sight. It has no eyes. It also stuns Will into place, like how Medusa stuns you. That's why, like, okay, why does Medusa turn you to stone? Because she is fear. She is a representation of fear. And what happens when you see fear? You become frozen. You're turned to stone. You're frozen in place. We know that like in the story of Perseus and Medusa, well, Perseus is just a stand-in for like stereotypical hero. It's a way for men to hear a story and feel good about themselves because they see themselves reflected in the male hero. We get that. But Medusa, the Gorgon, it's just monster that freezes you in place. It's not much deeper than just, it is deep, but not in the way you think. Medusa and the Demogorgon are abstracted fear. You're like, well, does the Demogorgon represent government corruption? Is it a metaphor for Will's coming out? No, the Demogorgon is capital F fear. It's kind of like the shark from Jaws, Bruce. Does the shark represent capitalistic greed? No, the mayor from Jaws represents capitalistic greed. He's the one who tries to keep the beach open just to get money.
We depend on the summer people here for our very lives.
You are not going to have a summer
unless
you deal with this problem.
We're not only going to have to close the beach, we're going to have to hire somebody to kill the shark.
So while the mayor is greed incarnate, the shark is just fear. Bruce, you don't see Bruce. You don't see the shark for most of the movie. Bruce is the unknown, the eternal devourer. It is fear with a capital F. So Bruce, the Demogorgon, Medusa, these are monsters that are just that, monsters. And that's not a bad thing whatsoever. I think like when you think about the Mind Flayer from season 2 of Stranger Things, in theory, the Mind Flayer is scarier because it's like bigger, but also like it's harder to conceptualize that the Mind Flayer is a thing. Like when you look at the Mind Flayer, it's hard to be scared of that because it's so all-consuming. Where the Demogorgon, you know, what are you scared of as a kid? You're scared of somebody coming in the door to get you. You're scared of somebody being under your bed. You're not really scared of this like massive eldritch parasite, you know? I guess what I'm trying to say is like not all art is consciously constructed. I don't think that the Demogorgon was created to like consciously represent one specific like moral failing or whatever. It was just there to be scary. And I feel like, okay, you get into that whole like blue curtain debate where like, you know, everyone, if you're watching this, you know the blue curtain meme, but if you don't know it, the blue curtain meme is a meme that talks about like you're studying literature in class and you hear about blue curtains and a story and you're like, oh, the blue curtains, they represent childhood grief and the blue does this. Some people are like, well, the curtains are just fucking blue. Sometimes the curtains are just fucking blue. There's nothing deeper than that. And as a Libra, I'm here to say that both of these people are wrong. I think the thing that people miss is that in art, not everything has to be a one-for-one representation. I think sometimes just adhering to a specific aesthetic sensibility is art enough. Imagine the blue curtains, okay? And say in the entire book, you're reading about the book, all the curtains are red. Red curtain here, red curtain there, red, red, red. And then there's one curtain that's blue. Okay, well, then the blue curtain probably represents something in specific, right? Well, but what if the blue curtain is just like part of the aesthetic of the world? What if everything in the book is blue? It's like, well, what does the blue curtain represent? It's like, well, it doesn't really represent one thing in specific. It's a part of an overall aesthetic sensibility. And just adhering to an aesthetic sensibility is art enough. It is important enough. The Demogorgon looks scary and it fits the aesthetic sensibility created in the world of Stranger Things. That's it. But that's not being anti-intellectual. That's not saying it's not that deep. That's asserting that creating a unique aesthetic is that deep in the first place. It's not lazy or lowbrow. What it is entertaining. It is a good story. It has a good monster that's entertaining. And art, above all else, has to be entertaining. Whether it's entertaining the person making the art or it's entertaining the people to watch the art, the main thing art is supposed to do is entertain.
Let me steal this moment from you now.
Okay, so what are the aesthetic sensibilities of Stranger Things? What are the aesthetic principles that build this story? Well, there are two main aesthetic realms in Stranger Things. There's normal Hawkins, Indiana, and then there is the Upside Down. Even when Nancy is trying to find the Demogorgon, or when Jonathan takes a picture of the Demogorgon, which exists in the Upside Down aesthetic, it kind of like the aesthetic of it exists in this forest area that kind of matches the aesthetic of the Upside Down. I guess there's also an aesthetic of Hawkins Lab, because Hawkins Lab is like the gate between Hawkins, Indiana, and the Upside Down. But we're gonna get to the gate. I'll get to Hawkins Lab later. So you have one aesthetic of Hawkins, Indiana. It's very homey. It's very colorful. It seems very normal. It's cozy. It's warm. And there's also like the 80s nostalgia, which I'm gonna get into 80s nostalgia later. But you know, there's a very identifiable aesthetic of Hawkins. There's also the aesthetic of the mutilated Upside Down. It looks like if Hawkins, Indiana were abandoned and then left to rot by this like fleshy vine everywhere. It's usually in the forest. Obviously, it doesn't always exist in the forest, especially in later seasons, but in the first season, you see it in the forest the most of the time, you know? So you have these two contrasting aesthetics, but they're like mirror worlds to one another. It's dualism. I feel like I always talk about fucking dualism in all of my videos, but like dualism is one of the primary storytelling devices we as humans have. It's also the way that we organize our thoughts. Like we organize day and night, but like where does night end and day begin? Like in your brain, you're like, well, daytime is when it's bright. But then you're like, well, only brightness exists in the daytime? It's like, well, no. Like in our brain, we're like, oh, there's plants and animals. And that's kind of what all life is. That's not true. There's also fungi and bacteria, but our brains construct things into binaries. Man and woman. Obviously, there's so much texture between the two, but dualism is our brain like defaults to binaries. And Hawkins, Indiana is a binary. And I think that dualism is a primary theme and a primary aesthetic sensibility of Stranger Things. The story exists because Will swapped with Eleven. You have Will, who is like a normal everyday boy who's kind of effeminate. They call him a fag.
Lonnie used to say he was queer, called him a fag.
And then you have Eleven, who's like an extraordinary, fantastical girl who looks more masculine.
Her head shaved. She doesn't even look like a girl.
And they become swapped. That's the whole point of season 1 is that they trade places. Obviously, Eleven is not from the Upside Down, but symbolically she's from that world. Until you get to the end of the season, you don't know exactly what Eleven is from. You don't know where she's from. But, you know, she's from that world of dark corruption. She's become swapped. It's a yin and a yang. You have Will existing in the Upside Down, which is a pip of the right side up existing in the Upside Down. And then you have Eleven, who's a pip of the Upside Down existing in the right side up. It's a yin and a yang. She comes from the world of fantasy and powers. You have powers. You have real powers.
Or you got a headache because you got powers. You have real powers inside of you.
And the entire series is both of them trying to hide. Eleven trying to hide from the government, Will trying to hide from the Demogorgon. Will comes from the reality of fake magic because he loves D&D, and then Eleven comes from this fantasy world with actual magic. She moved herself. At the end of the story, Eleven has to sacrifice herself in order to save Will. Obviously not actually, it's metaphorically, but like, look at how it's juxtaposed. Like, the scene of Eleven killing the Demogorgon and sending herself to the Upside Down is spliced together with Will being saved from the Upside Down. So it's as to metaphorically say that she's returning to one world, he's coming to this world. It's a way of causing the balance to go back. Okay, arm. My arm looked giant. All right. There's other examples of dualism, not just including Eleven and Will and the Upside Down and the right side up. You have Nancy and Barb, who like as Barb died, Nancy was having sex. What is sex? Well, sex is the creation of life through, you know, that's what sex is. And it's the opposite of death. As one thing happens to Nancy, the opposite happens to Barb, and it's juxtaposed next to each other. Crazy to think that while other people were dying at the Ariana concert, I was living. Naomi Smalls was crazy for that. It's juxtaposition. It's putting opposites next to one another, and it creates texture. And texture is what makes a story feel rich and engaging. It's like you have Jonathan and Steve, the two guys that Nancy's like fighting over. You have Steve, who she's with originally, who was like kind of douchey, much more like masculine, and then you have Jonathan, who is like kind of like a creep, but much more like effeminate looking. He's very mousy. And they both kind of do creepy thing. Like Jonathan takes this picture of Barb. It's really weird, very creepy to stalk on people. What Jonathan did is much creepier, but actually much less vindictive than what Steve did, which was like paint that shit calling Nancy a whore. But like Jonathan and Steve are foils to each other. And at the end, Nancy kind of chooses to kind of go with Jonathan in the later seasons. But like, you know, in the season, these are two foils. And I'm not saying this is like a deliberate storytelling, like philosophical thing trying to like instill in the audience. No, just having these foils of each other, it makes texture and it makes sense because the whole thing is built upon the right side up and upside down. So dualism like is baked into how the story is pushed along. It's part of the psychic soup. But what dualism kind of states is that one thing cannot exist without the other. Hawkins, Indiana can't exist without the Upside Down. Barb can't die unless Nancy has sex. The Upside Down isn't a parasite. There aren't themes of parasitism in the first season. As it goes along, parasitism becomes like actually like a really prominent theme of the story. But in the first season, the Upside Down is not framed as a parasite. It's not even framed as malicious. The Demogorgon isn't evil, it's displaced. It's somewhere where it shouldn't be. The inherent liminality of Stranger Things. The right side up and the upside down are just inverted mirror versions of one another.
Get 'em to swallow. places.
So Stranger Things was a nostalgia monster. Obviously, Stranger Things itself didn't create that wave of regressive 80s aesthetic from like the 2010s, 2020s. It didn't create that, but it was on the forefront of it. I forgot where I read this, but the Duffer Brothers, one of them, they were talking about how like they didn't live through the 80s. They weren't depicting a childhood that they had. What they did was they created basically a world that existed as like a hyper reality of 80s film. The Stranger Things isn't a series about the 80s. It's more like a series about how the 80s appeared on film and television. That's why it becomes so like distilled nostalgia. Like Gen X people watching the show, well, they had their childhood in the 80s. So when they watch it, they don't really like have a deep remembering of what the 80s was like from like an adult point of view. They have it from a child's point of view. And like millennials watching it, they grew up watching, they grew up in the 90s watching 80s media. So that's how they remember the 80s as well. Outside of like the look and the needle drops, how did Stranger Things season 1 captivate everybody's nostalgia? One major one is like the synthwave aesthetic, like the synthwave sound design, the score. It really tugged on your heartstrings and made you feel that felt sense of whimsy, of nostalgia. Because, you know, music can hit parts of the brain differently, which is, that's what season 4 is about. And if I only could make a deal with God. But I think the main reason that this series became so like, it evoked so much sense of nostalgia was because it was told from the perspective of children. And nostalgia is typically a childlike emotion, or nostalgic memories are usually created in childhood. It's when you think the world is still all bright and whimsical. You're nostalgic for that feeling of childhood. Obviously, you can have nostalgia for moments after childhood, of course, but like 80%, 70-80% of all nostalgia, I feel like the memories come from childhood. Even me, I was like abused in my childhood, and most of my nostalgic memories are still from my childhood. Check out my song, I Want to Kill My Dad.
Did you forget that time you beat your wife?
But like, it was weird to have this show be so popular and have all these adults watch a series where like all the leads were 11, 12-year-olds. Like, that was weird.
That was weird for me.
It's not like a Harry Potter situation where like adults, when they were children, they read the series, and then when they got older, they wanted to like re-experience the series. It wasn't like that. This was a new IP. But I think by having all the leads be like 12 years old, it invited the adults to watch the series and indulge in a sense of whimsy and excitement that you can only get as a child. A lot of times adults, and even non-adults, but a lot of times people, they don't want to engage in like fantasy, D&D, nerdy shit because they view it as cringe and they don't want to be perceived as cringe. Everybody loves fantasy. We all love fantasy. That's why like all of the stories throughout history have been fantasy stories that survive. But we're worried of the social backlash and the stigma of being labeled a nerd or a gamer. You know, I think that's why like shows like Game of Thrones or series like the Avengers or Avatar, they're so successful because they tell these fantasy stories, but the budget is so magnificent that it overwhelms and dazzles your super ego of culture. And it's like, well, I don't normally like fantasy, but come on, I have to watch Game of Thrones. It's so good. It's on a different level. I mean, and it is on a different level. There's so much money put into it. And season 1 of Stranger Things, it has such a smaller budget. So how does it invite adults to be a part of this story on a smaller budget? Well, you have child actors. Very smartly, they had great child acting. Like, if you have adults talking about like the Demogorgon and the Upside Down and telekinesis, that's kind of cringe. Whether or not it should be considered cringe is a different story, but that's cringe. If you had a bunch of like 40-year-olds being like, the Demogorgon's coming to get us, like that's crazy. High fantasy stories can become like a shitty CW show if they don't have the budget. And if you watch a show that's super fantastical, you'll get vicarious cringe because like you'll think the show is just a bunch of people LARPing in the forest going fireball, which I have nothing against those people. I'm filming in my side house in a dress. I don't care about that. I'm just saying like the average person, the people who aren't crazy, they find that shit cringy. But we want these stories. We want a sense of fantasy. It's good for us developmentally to like indulge in fantasy story. So Stranger Things is this very, very serious fantasy show, but it has these children in it who experience the childlike wonder. And because that's the point of view of the show primarily, you experience the childlike wonder with them, which causes you to feel nostalgic. It allows you to play pretend with these kids. We want fantasy, but we have to find like a weird, kinky route to circumvent the shame so that we can experience the fantasy. Stranger Things lets you feel like a child without feeling weird. You get to escape into a world of monsters and power. You have powers. You have real power.
You got powers. You have real powers inside of you. And you don't seem to understand.
Okay, but here's a question. Why would you want to escape into a world of government corruption and conspiracy? Why would you want to escape into a world of monsters and evil dimensions? How does watching this like help you feel like a child? What does the whole Hawkins Lab being behind it represent? And look, while the entire series has this weird nationalist layer to it, I don't really want to get into that. I'm not talking about nationalism in this video. It gets worse as the series goes on, but in season 1, there isn't as much of a nationalism layer, okay? Oddly enough, it is soothing to pretend that an evil lab and parallel dimensions of monsters are behind actual pain and trauma. It is soothing to believe that. When you're a child, a child believes that bad people are the reason bad things happen. It's childish to think that bad things happen to bad people and good things happen to good people. To mature is to realize that good people and bad people do not exist. But people still have that schema that was developed when they were children. That part of them still exists into modern day. So a lot of people still believe that the reason bad things happen is because bad people do bad things. It is difficult to grow up and realize that there is no grand conspiracy, but our brains find it narratively fulfilling to pretend that in reality, there is someone behind the scenes, like pulling the strings. It is extremely anxiety inducing to realize that there is nobody behind it. There's nobody behind this shit. There are no adults. There's just a bunch of people who don't know what they're doing. Well, okay, there is the Heritage Foundation and AIPAC, but I'm not talking about Republican lobbying groups in this video. That's a different thing. Anyways, Stranger Things is formatted in such a conspiratorial, childlike way that even though it is frightening, it's soothing to our brain because it's giving our brain what it wants. The show says, yes, these bad things are happening because these bad men are doing it. It's the bad men. The show is formatted in this way. Jonathan and Nancy are trying to find Barb. Hopper is trying to uncover the lab. Joyce is trying to save Will. And the kids are trying to work with Eleven. It's like all these people have their own separate missions, but you realize they're all converging to the same thing. They're all trying to figure out the same thing. And the end of the season is all tied together, and you realize it's all orchestrated by this like controlling, powerful father figure who's Papa. And it's extremely satisfying. The ending of season 1 is so satisfying because you have all this mystery and you realize they're all going together. But why is it satisfying? Why is it satisfying for it all to converge into one point? Well, it's the same reason that conspiracy theorists get satisfied with what they're doing. There's a rush of falling down the rabbit hole, of trying to put all the pieces together, of trying to discover the point. What is the one thing behind all of it? In reality, there is no point. There is no one secret government cabal. There isn't that. There is not one person at the top of the pyramid controlling everything. That's not how reality works. But that's how our brains like reality to work, because it makes intuitive narrative sense. And that's why it feels good in Stranger Things when it says, yes, you fell down the rabbit hole, you put all the pieces together, and everything is converging into one final point. And what is the point? What is the point of Stranger Things? Like everything converging at the very end? Well, there isn't a point. It's just satisfying. It's just good storytelling. The point is to be entertaining. It's not making a statement about this type of thinking. Stranger Things is just giving our brains what it wants. That's why it's such a feel-good show, even though it is frightening. It's soothing to pretend that there is somebody behind the curtain. It's soothing to pretend that there is the giant Wizard of Oz. It's soothing to pretend that rather than recognize that everything just kind of happens because of happenstance. That is terrifying. That's really existentially terrifying. So a lot of people, it feels better to pretend otherwise. That's it. That's my video. This is gonna be, I don't know if it'll be short. It'll be shorter than my last one. Moral of the story, I'm not sending hate to the new season. I actually haven't seen, okay. Great. I actually haven't seen the new season yet. I don't actually really want to see it. I'm not spreading hate. Moral of the story, not everything in art is a one-for-one comparison. Adhering to an aesthetic sensibility is art enough. Okay, yeah, that's it. Listen to my songs if you want. I don't know.